Good morning. Can everybody hear me? Hi. I guess so. How are we doing on our Friday morning? I hope everybody is well. For all of the students who are required to be a part of this class, or who are required to make sure that they attend the symposium, I'm gonna need you to just put a message in the chat to let us know that you are present. So here we are, Friday. It's funny. I saw these links for Dr. Ross Mikey C to log in, and I'm like, I'm already logged in, but then I realized I sent the faculty the direct link to so all the faculty who use that direct link, you're all logged in as Dr. Ross Mikey C. So you might want to change the name to there's another Dr. Ross Mikey C. This must be another faculty member trying to get in. So here we are for Movement Matters. You know, I found a very interesting book during my pre-days of preparing for this symposium. And the book is actually entitled Movement Matters. I guess some of us may know of it. Why did I lose my screen? Oh. Have you ever seen this book? I'm just going to read the back cover. So this is a book called Movement Matters, Essays on Movement Science, Movement Ecology, and the Nature of Movement by Kathy Bowman. And the back cover says, Movement Matters is a collection of essays which biomechanist Katie Bowman continues her groundbreaking investigation of the mechanics of our sedentary culture and profound potential for human movement. Here, she widens her "You are how you move" message that invites us to consider our personal relationship with sedentarism, privilege, and nature. Bowman explores how convenience often means less movement, not more time, the missing movement nutrients of our food, how to include more nature in education, the impact of adding movement to permaculture and ecological models, our needs for vitamin community and group movement, unapologetically direct, often hilarious, and always compassionate, Movement Matters demonstrates that human movement is powerful and important, and that living a movement-filled life is perhaps the most joyful and efficient way to transform your body, community, and world. So I felt like that was just a good way to kick off our approach towards this topic of movement matters and why movement matters and why movement matters to us. I think for many of you, you've been in my class at some point, shape, or form, and you've heard me say that movement is life. I feel that this book really looks into that as a concept, as a practice, as a theory. There's no separation from movement and life. You've heard me say again, from the somatic perspective, when there's no longer any life within the body, there's no longer any movement within the body. We're constantly moving. It's what actually makes us living beings. So, and then even aside from a physical perspective, the notion of movement is very much involved in the human experience, as humans are migratory people. And when you think about the fertile crescent of civilization, if you will, looking at how the Nile flowed against gravity flowing up, and from there is where civilization came. We migrated from one particular source to all of these different places where we're now existing. So those two realms of physical and ideological movement, but still literal movement, also coupled with the notion of philosophical movements and movements that are associated with social progression. Many of us would attach ourselves to cultures or movements that deal with how we bring more equality into humanity. So I look at movement, as many of you know, as a very broad spectrum. To look at, to quote Richard Schechner, I take a broad spectrum approach to movement and how it engages with our life, our practice, and our communication and connection to our species. I've said in many occasions that we as movement practitioners or studiers of dance have this amazing opportunity to really investigate how and why movement matters to us, what makes it so important. And one of the great things about our discipline is our ability to really investigate ourselves. I feel that knowledge of self is key to human understanding, because ultimately it's the lack of understanding of ourselves that breeds the lack of understanding between how we communicate with others. So understanding how we move physically, metaphorically, ideologically, philosophically, culturally, how we move and understand our movement is something that we are given the opportunity. It's a gift. It's as my wife calls it, it's like a huge privilege that we have to study ourselves, because in reality, there are many people in the world that are not given this opportunity to just focus on themselves. And I've said before, I feel that we do our discipline and our field a disservice if we're not really truly investigating the deeper sense of ourselves and reflecting that in what it is we do as performers and as human beings. Everything that we learn in the studio about how our body moves in the space, in relationship to itself, in relationship to the space, in relationship to people that are in the space with us, are all things that can be reflected in our everyday lives. Coming back to that Richard Schechner perspective of the broad spectrum approach towards performance, we're all performers every day of our lives. We're performing in these different ways, and Ross Gray talks about informal versus semi-formal and formal performance. We all know the formal performance because that's what we train for in our field, in our careers, is we train to be on that stage in front of the audience, the proscenium arch or whatever type of stage. It's the setting that we aspire for as people who are studying performance or studying dance. But outside of that realm of formal performance, there are the semi-formal performances, which is what I'm doing now, which is how there is somewhat of a setting, but the formal nature of audience and performer is a little bit different. There's more of an interactive engagement between the teacher or the performer and the audience. Then you have the very informal way of performing. So the semi-formal is this environment, and the informal is the everyday, meaning in the sense of every day we're performing what it is that we want people to know or see or understand about us. Some of my students have heard me say, people only know what you show. Yeah, so every day we think about how we want the world to view us. We think about how we want to be presented so that we can identify and connect with certain cultures or people that we find similarities with. So in essence, every day we have informal performances. Every day we step into um, different environments and change the way that we engage in that environment in order to progress. You know, movement a lot of times, oftentimes deals with progress. So this is kind of the open palette of how I personally look at movement and why it matters, and taking it even more on a personal level. As many of you know, like I say this a lot, that I am a product of hip hop, but I'm also a child of civil rights. So these things are socio-political movements that were about equitable change within our communities. We're about projecting a different way of living to the mainstream that didn't really recognize that people were necessarily living in these ways. So being a child of the civil rights movement, these types of values of the importance of movement have been instilled in me since before I was born. Being a product of hip hop and coming through the generation of hip hop where the culture was not popular, growing up in a suburban white environment in the nation's capital, as Dana mentioned, you know, I'm now a proud graduate of the John R. Lewis High School, newly converted name, but that change is a testament to the types of things that existed before. But growing up in that sort of environment, but and knowing that I identified with a culture that was very marginalized, even within my suburban community, didn't didn't challenge me with my own identity. It just made me recognize that I needed to find a way to mediate the gap. As a person who considers themselves to be a cultural conduit or a cultural broker, there were certain realities that I was exposed to that other people weren't, and I could somehow see the in-between. But that allowed me to move in a way that was understanding of both of those disparate kind of communities, meaning the affluent, upper middle class white community that I was being raised in, and then also the urbanized community that was marginalized in my neighborhood, as well as in the surrounding areas of me growing up. Growing up during a time where my culture, my movement was not really accepted as something that was a reality, was interesting to see the shift in how commercialization and commoditization of a culture then can move it into a different space. And this has happened throughout centuries, especially when it comes to things associated with ethnic or Africanist art and aesthetic. So many times you've heard me say to a lot of you that you are the hip hop generation, which means that you have grown to understand hip hop as a part of popular culture. You don't even really recognize all the influences that hip hop culture has in popular culture because it's just so amalgamated. For me, it's a little bit different to watch that movement of a culture that was marginalized and repressed and oppressed and associated with a community of people that were degraded in an environment, to now see it propagated as the norm, and the perpetuation of certain ideals of the Africanist or the Black American experience as the norm, which is oftentimes perceived as a negative perception. So it's been an interesting concept to see certain aspects of the culture that I grew up living now become propagated as the reality for many people, and people start to adapt and to assimilate to these cultural dispositions. I hold hip hop very true to who I am because hip hop is that platform for youth expression for me. It is the platform that allowed me to start making some personal discoveries of the world that I lived in and how the world saw me and how I wanted to be seen in the world, how I needed to perform so that I could be the living contradiction to people's expectations of a Black man moving through the space that I was living in. the hip hop is what led me to the movement that now is expressed in a lot of my ideologies and the way that I live and my physical appearance as a Pan-Africanist and as a Rastafarian. Pan-Africanism is a movement that is centered around the recognition of people of African descent having a place that is theirs. If Asia can be for Asians and Europe can be for Europeans, then Africa should be for Africans at home and abroad. Unfortunately, we were raised in a system that detaches us from our places of origin and essentially indoctrinates us to be satisfied with where we are, regardless of the circumstances. Pan-Africanism, thank goodness for people like Marcus Garvey, showed me that there was a place for me to be, that I had options, that the place in which I was born did not constitute how I connected to humanity. And so always having that as the foundation of my spiritual and physical growth, there was an understanding of me being American, but me being an African first. Even though I do recognize I have a multiplicity of ethnicities in my bloodline. I'm Prussian, I'm Irish, I'm Polish, I'm Native American, if you will, Indigenous American. I probably have the least amount of African blood in my disposition, but I understand the way that the world sees me. I understand how I have to navigate myself within humanity in order to gain some equitable value in my own life. Pan-Africanism is a big part of the Rastafari movement. And Rastafari is all about equitable change within humanity, basic inalienable human rights for all human beings. It's through the works and deeds of someone like Haile Selassie, the last emperor of Ethiopia, that you could see the things that needed to be done within the world structure to get the powers that be to recognize that people of color were of equal value to people who had less melanin. A lot of these things were kind of separated from how we view history and how we view our connection to all the different things that have gone on in history. But for me, there is no way for me to teach you all about how movement matters in my life for you to not, if I don't share for you the spectrum of how movement fits into all of our lives. It's not just the physical. It's not just the things that we do with our body. It's not just our understanding of how we move from place to place, but it's also our ideologies, our philosophies of movement that will allow us to start to reach towards more of a humane, universal morality within our human experience. So I would like to open up the conversation, first of all, to any of the faculty who may be on the call to express their own viewpoints as to why or how you think that movement matters in your own life or just in life in general. Not everybody chime in at once.
Hey, hey.
Hey, hey. That must be Karen Prawl, but it just says Dr. Ross Mikey. Go ahead, Karen.
I know I left it. I was like, well, Dr. Ross Mikey today. Yes. So I find this to be very interesting. And thank you, Dr. Ross, for opening. That was so eloquently spoken. As far as movement for myself, since I'm older, oh Lord, I really didn't think much about movement mattering when I was growing up. It wasn't something that was, you understand, and I think a lot of us feel like that. it wasn't something that was important because I was young and I felt, well, I'm moving all the time anyway. So what does it matter? I'm doing my thing. Dr. Ross is dealing with hip hop. I grew up in the time of R&B. R&B was my thing, and funk. And what I did was a lot of our dancing was done on the outside and things like that, you know, in the backyards, people doing things. But as a woman and having children, have had 3 children, I think of movement even as my children were in my womb, and the movement that when my first child, a child in the womb, it was just amazing to me. I couldn't believe it, you know, that I could be going through something and I had a body in my body, you know, and I thought, my God, this is what, God, you are amazing. What can you do? What can you not do? And just feeling the child move, it just made my whole body and my whole mind think of other things as far as movement. When I began to do different things and working with someone who's in a wheelchair and can't move their entire body, I mean, to me, it is I think some of my most fulfilling times as a teacher has been with people who cannot move, people who don't have the opportunity to move their bodies, but they are moving their minds. And watching someone who cannot move anything, not even their head, okay, and what do you do with this person? And so get right in the face and see the eyes moving and the eyes going from the left to the right, up, down, and around, and these things, and being able to understand that this person is moving in their body, but I can't see it on the outside. To me, this was everything, okay? And it taught me more about movement. And when Dr. Ross talked about your wife saying that it was a gift, that hit me right away, because I feel that being able to move, to me, and being able to be a dancer is a gift. And when I'm on the floor, when I'm teaching, almost always when I'm teaching, I will put my hands up to the sky. And what I'm doing while I'm teaching is I'm giving thanks. I'm giving thanks for being able to do this, to be able to do this type of dance, what I do, and to be able to still move across the floor. Child, I'm not a young thing anymore, baby. Yes. But to be able to do this, I always give thanks, because I could be somebody that just sits at a computer or that just sits down all the time and has no, you know, I don't get up. I can't do that. I got to move. So myself, I love the movement that I do, and I love that I'm able to do what I do. Okay. But when you talked about, you know, not just physical movement, that's another thing. Not just physical, because I can travel in my mind. I can travel in my mind. I can move in my mind. I can do choreography in my mind. Okay. I can do many things in my mind. If I want to center myself, and if I'm in a situation that I really don't want to be in, I take myself away right in my mind. I travel. I move away from there. I go to the positive side. And this is what I deal with. Okay. I think that I don't know, what are we without movement? That was the thing that I thought of. What are we without movement? And that doesn't mean that, ooh, if I can't move my body, if I can't walk, if I can't do this, talking to me is a movement. I listen to the way people talk. And have you ever really listened to a person talk, and people from different areas, how they speak? That's movement in itself. Okay. Just movement in itself, just to be able to speak and dance. To me, when I listen to people and they speak, sometimes to me, oh my God, that's dance right there. Do you know what you just did? You are dancing and you didn't even know it. You were dancing the whole time. I'm not going to say much, but for me, movement to me is on a daily. Even when I see people walk down the street, and I'm not talking about people who walk down the street with headphones on. I'm talking about people who walk down the street naturally. And that natural walk is their movement, and they're talking to me when they walk. When I see people walk into my classroom, when I see people do anything, I kind of look at the walk and the way you present yourself, and I'm like, yes, I see you, I understand you. This is a beautiful thing, Dr. Ross. I'm so glad that you're doing this. I'm glad, I'm happy, and giving these students the ability to get on here and say what they feel. So therefore, I'm going to take my whole self and stop talking. Thank you so much.
Give thanks, Queen Pearl. Can we because I was in a frantic moment this morning of trying to get everything situated in the space, Biba knows, she came through and saw me like trying to figure all of this stuff out. Can we please take a moment to give thanks for our ability to move? So everybody, can we stand, please, just for a second? And as always, we give thanks for life. And as my song says, Iration. But we want to make sure that we're always giving thanks for the movement of the mind, movement of the body, the spirit, and the movement of the earth from which we all came and shall return. Yeah, so that's one of the things that for me is about presence. When you take a moment to acknowledge the gift that is life, in a way you're allowing yourself to be more present in your life. Yeah, to quote Eckhart Tolle, in The Power of Now, there is no past or future. There is only now. The things that cause us the most anxieties are our attempt to prepare for the future or trying to hold on to something from our past. When we are fully present, the future and the past don't matter because you never really get to the future. And when you're holding on to the past, you're only attempting to relive the past in your present. How does that even make sense? So, any other faculty members that would like to share how and why movement matters in the life of your being?
Hi. I'll share.
Cool.
Well, first of all, thank you, Dr. Ross, and thank you, Karen, for your beautiful words and sharing. I'm in my office and I'm like gonna teach at 11:30, so I'm like moving around. I'm like, should I turn my camera off? I don't know. And then I started thinking about, wow, it's so interesting that, you know, I'm sort of being hyper aware of how my movement could be read as a distraction or not listening, a non-participation, and the ways in which we are sort of like asked to sit still and face. And that reads as an authentic kind of happy mode of witnessing and participation. And I'm just sort of saying that because as we move into the semester with the Zoom and this kind of like intense face front that we're building in our bodies as we are sitting and experiencing the symposium right now, I'm just curious if we can all collectively experiment with alternatives that are not read as I don't know, indiscreet or something that would be less than, right? Okay, so just that's like when I'm having this sort of somatic experience of being in this space with you all. I love Movement Matters. I was going back to Judith Butler, bodies that matter, movement and bodies are connected, like especially for us in dance, you know, and the importance of the ways in which the body and the way that it's read through movement has this kind of performative force. So that's a whole other topic. But I was like, oh, I should go back to my Judith Butler if we're talking about mattering, the matter that is the actual materiality, you know, of the thing, but also the value systems that are inscribed and that we project forth through our own agency and collective practices, right? I wrote my master's thesis like 15 years ago. What was it? No, 13 years ago. And I called it Movement and Materiality. And I was like, oh wow, okay, so I do have a background in like thinking through these things. And it was a triptych, and there were 3 different elements. There was choreography, dance, and there was a philosophy. If we're getting autobiographical, I'm the child of a philosopher. My father is a philosopher. So I've always been raised with that kind of intense sort of like, well, he was a phenomenologist, post-structuralist. So again, that's another thing, but but sort of thinking about the ways in which we can bring a kind of physicalized, sensorial, perceptive, somatic, kind of existing to thought, to ideas, to the kinds of modes of thinking how we be, thinking through being, ontology, right? So there was that, and then there was another section about architecture, because space is the thing that grounds me. So in terms of being grounded, I come from Northern California. Like I said, I'm the child of a philosopher and a classical pianist. I was, going back to Karen and this moment in my mother's womb and dancing as she's playing music. I was always hitting my head on the underside of the pianos as I was a little kid and dancing around the room. And, it's something that's always been, never a question. It's just, this is being, right? This is being in the ways in which dance is an extension, a study of, a mode of investigating movement, right? I also think about architecture in relationship to social practices and spaces. They're physical, the ways in which we can impress our bodies into a space and live in a space past the time that we are there, right? Through our, through history, through memory, through absence. There's not, there's always this question of movement being ephemeral, yeah? And that connects us to economies of value and getting paid, which in this economic crisis that is unfolding is an important conversation for us to be having. That's materiality, right? That's matter. That's movement that matters too. So also I love to, think about architecture as the ways in which we can produce the spaces that we want to inhabit a worlding of sorts. And that we do that choreographically, we do that through our practices of collaboration, and we do that as a kind of, like leaders of the movement body that is the body of all of us. Yeah, we have our individual, we have our social, we have our political, we have our collective body. So anyways, I just want to wrap it up there. Thank you. I'm so happy to be a part of our collective body and to lead the movements that we are leading this semester amongst us. And again, yeah, let's just keep experimenting with the Zoom, Do I have to face it all the time? I don't know. I go upside down. Yeah, we can do that with each other. Okay, I will not take it as an insult. Ciao, ciao.
Give thanks, Dr. Biba Bell, for that insight. I mean, really, this is what it's about for me. Sharing your perspectives. You've heard me say reality is perceptional. So in order for us to really learn how to grow collectively as a species, we have to kind of learn about each other in a way that's broader than the student-teacher relationship, and it's more on a real human experiential level. I was listening to, the author escapes my name, but I was listening to someone talk on YouTube about the things that make us human. What is it that makes us human? Our imperfections. These are the things that make us unique. But when you think about our field, and I'm relating this to a story that my wife told me yesterday. She found out that she works with 2 ballet dancers. She works at the Target, and then all of a sudden she's having a conversation with 2 people, and one of the kids is like, yeah, I used to dance in Lincoln Center in New York, and I was with this ballet company. And, you know, my wife is like, okay, she doesn't know. She doesn't, it's not registering for her. You know, she's like, and then the other guy's like, yeah, we danced together in a company in New York. And, you know, since COVID happened, we've been unemployed. So we moved back to Michigan and been working here to like supplement our income. And so I was saying to my wife, you know, it's interesting to me how some artists in the state that we're in now with the pandemic, how some artists feel stifled, like they feel like they can't do anything. And I had to explain, and my wife was like, because she sees me, she's like, well, why are you just not creating? Why are you just not out doing what you do? And the person's response was just that that's not what I do. You know, and I had to explain to her that sometimes in dance, we train to be the carbon copy. We train to fit the role of what it is that we are attempting, that we think that we're supposed to be doing with our life. And then when that doesn't work out for us, there's nothing else for us to do. If you are a mover, how you move matters, because how you move is a reflection of who you are. She went further to tell me a story about the guy was like, you know, he was at a wedding and somebody said to him, oh, you're a dancer. And he said, no, I'm a ballet dancer. And I'm like, wow, that's very particular. I think most people on this call would understand how limiting that is. You're in a social setting and someone says, oh, you're a dancer. And you're like, no, I'm a ballet dancer. Don't expect me to get out there and social dance. You know, so how we think about how we move and how we think about our abilities to move is so important. This is why I love our program, because we're stripping down a lot of those mentalities and thoughts of how you were thinking you were supposed to be before you got to this university. And you're now starting to discover new ways of being, because you see the diversity of how your faculty have moved and how all of the people that we bring in have moved throughout their own career path. You realizing that there is no one way. It can't be one way, because we're all here and we don't all come from the same place. So I just wanted to throw that little anecdote out of again, something that many of you have heard me say, the key to longevity in any industry is versatility. So I would never want anyone who graduates from this program to say, I am just this type of dancer. You know what I mean? And again, I always say that dance is what you do. Moving is a part of life. Dance is based upon somebody's subjective perception of aesthetic. We are humans before we are dancers. And that was something I had to learn through my own training. Because as many of you know, I didn't get into dance until I was in college. I knew nothing about dance. I realized I had this revelation at 3 o'clock in the morning when I could not fall asleep last night, that I never lacked confidence when I got into the arts. What I lacked was competence. I had no idea what this thing was. I was confident that I could do it, but I was not competent of what it was going to take to get me to where I wanted to be. I didn't really know where I wanted to be. I would like to think now, some 20 years later, post-PhD, that I'm somewhat competent about what it is that I'm doing and what it is that I'm sharing and how important movement is and what I project as a mover. I'm a lot more aware. So I'm just throwing all that out there again to get us to think about movement in a broader context than just our physical bodies. Also, Biba had mentioned movement of text, or Karen had mentioned movement of, like, everything moves. Yeah. Okay. I see Jessica. She has She has opened up her microphone.
I have. Hi, everybody. I just wanted, before I go, can we just take a nice deep breath in and out? One more time. Yeah. In and out. I feel like Zoom makes my breath shallow even when I'm in these beautiful spaces together. So I have to remind myself, like, just like how important that is. So thank you. I really felt called to speak next because Dr. Ross was talking about extension of movement beyond what we do in the studio and thinking about these things. And I feel like that's just been so much a part of my existence in the field, as someone who's intersected with dance and other disciplines that sort of oftentimes don't see themselves in relationship to movement at all, let alone dance. A lot of you know that I work with tech. I'm doing VDC this semester. But as a newer faculty, I don't know, a lot of you probably don't know much about me. And especially if you're here and you're new, right? But I wanted to share, I think for me, I've always had this fascination with dance, but I've also had a fascination with science and scientific research. This was early on for me. I was obsessed with anatomy when I was in high school. And when I was in college, I ended up doing a double major in dance and psychology, and I was really interested in research psych, and thinking about how we understand people through scientific method. And that led me to my graduate studies, and I was in a interdisciplinary research lab as a dancer, but working with psychologists and engineers and computer scientists and digital musicians, thinking about how we address big issues by bringing different people to the table. And that's always been really fascinating to me. Like when you throw people into a space from seemingly different disciplines and you give space for people to feel heard and to have conversation, what happens? But as I've been in this space for quite some time of like balancing these two different perspectives, as you do, I think every time you walk into a gen ed course, right, you feel how your practices rub up against different ways of being. I think about how a lot of times there's two things that tend to happen, right? There's a sense of like a severe imposter syndrome. Has anybody felt that? Where you go into these spaces and you're like, I'm not meant to be here. This space isn't for me. I'm not equipped. And there can feel like there's this lack or this loss or this not having of that can feel really palpable. And I think that also for me is sort of like a sense of gaslighting, right? That our skills are not valid, are not valuable, are not tangible to people. And as somebody who's done this sort of negotiation between these different spaces for quite some time, one thing I've learned over time is that it's just, we live in a mode and a language of movement that is far richer. We are very, very well learned in the language of movement. We are fluent. We are fluent. We are far more educated in the language of movement than people even know is possible. So it's about, we know what people don't even know, if that makes sense. And I think about that and it's really, it makes me feel like such a gift, right? Not just a gift that I have this capacity to move and that I have the privilege of making dance a part of my life and movement a part of my life, but a gift that I feel very present when I move in those spaces, and I see how a framing without it looks and feels. And it really helps me feel, when I go in those spaces, when I'm working with computer scientists, which I do a lot in engineers, is not that I don't have what is needed in those spaces, but there's just so much that I have that is not even understood and is desperately needed. Because as Dr. Ross said at the opening, one of the things we're learning about our engineered world is that convenience and efficiency oftentimes stripping movement out. And that comes from a lack of fluency in dance and movement. It comes from a lack of understanding of this sort of the deep need we have as people, as humans, as part of humanity to move. And for me, that's not a designed world that I want to live in, and nor is it the design world that I want for my child in the future. And I think about how deeply spaces that don't have that fluency need it, and need it on our terms, not on their terms. And so I want to encourage you to think, when you go into those gen ed spaces, when you go into those spaces of other classes that maybe work with a scientific method, or don't, are non-art spaces in general, right? That you come with a huge fluency in movement that is so desperately needed in those spaces. And you come with a gem of knowledge that they will never understand unless they take that invitation to move. It cannot be learned passively. We know that. It cannot be read in a book. It has to be moved. And so I just want you to know that you always come with gifts, and you always come into those spaces with something that, if people want the invitation, you bring to that space. And we have that. We are so gifted. We see the world differently. And that way of seeing is so desperately needed as we think about our futures and we think about right now. So I just encourage you to go in those spaces, owning those spaces, knowing that you come with something. And if people don't understand it, that's not about you. That is about a lack of fluency in our language. Because we are, even if you know another verbal language, we're all bilingual. I like to think of it that way. I know English. I know Croatian really badly, because that's where my husband's from. So I'm kind of I got that. But I am definitely fluent in 2 languages. And the second one is movement. It is a language. It is a way of seeing the world. It shifts. It changes the way that we experience who we are, how we understand our world, just like language does. So I just wanted to give that to you as a sort of a gift, as we, especially going in all these Zoom spaces, right? And feeling how it can feel a lot like this, like Biba was saying, it feels very frontal. You have it. Just own it. Yeah.
Give thanks so much, Jessica. So she just, one of the last things that she said brought up an interesting thing to me about how movement is a language. Movement is the first language. It is the first language. It is how we communicated before we developed any verbalization. When you think about the old humans, there was no, hello, how you doing? There was grunts and things and I always like to use the Italians as an example. And I say this from my own experience of being in Italy and not really knowing very much Italian when I first went. Of course, I grew with some fluency after time. But when I was there in the beginning, not speaking a lot of Italian, I could understand what they were saying by the way that they embodied the symbolism of the word through their physical expression. Yeah? So there's something to be said about how everything is symbolic. Something many of you have heard me speak about. Everything in life is contextually and culturally specific. Meaning the way that you move in one class or in one culture could have one particular meaning there, and the exact same movement could have a completely different meaning in a different class or a different culture. When you think about gestures. Language is the same way. It's text. There's a book called Metaphors We Live by Lakoff and Johnson. And it speaks to the fact of every word that we say is a symbol. That symbol and our understanding of it is based upon the cultural specificity that we know and understand. And as a person who's taught English in non-English speaking countries, I get how language is a metaphor. Think about the metaphors that we live by. Think about all the things that we say every day that we don't recognize are metaphors. time is money. You understand what that means? We equate the amount of time spent to the amount of money that can be made. That's why we say things like, don't waste my time. Because when you're wasting my time, you're wasting my money. Yeah, these things are things that we say on I'm so hungry I could eat a horse. It's a metaphor, right? Everything is symbolic. Everything that we hear has to be interpreted by our understanding of things from our past experiences, to use Pierre Bourdieu's habitus. Yeah, the structure that we relate everything in our past to understand what we're experiencing in the present. So coming back to that, what Jessica was saying, movement is so important. It is the quintessential first way in which we communicate it. Somehow we've developed these other ways of communicating that has detached us from our awareness of how we move, our awareness of what we do and how that communicates how we feel more so than what we say. The body never lies, but words can. I think we have 2 more faculty on this call, and Jessica has unmuted herself. So I'm turning it over. Hannah has unmuted herself. I'm turning it over.
It's fine.
My bad, it was Freudian slip.
Hi, everyone. I was, so many things have been going through my head, but I've been thinking about movement in like my world right now. And a couple of the things that are present is physically moving. Like a lot of you just moved physically into a new place or didn't, or you moved home, whatever that means. So that to me that's big. Like these are things that we just say, oh yeah, I'm moving, and it's an uprooting and a moving somewhere and then a regrounding, right? And so that's sitting with me. I'm also thinking about in these times how we are in relationship to other people has really changed. Early in COVID, I recall being so aware that I was a dancer, a mover, because in this 6 to 10 foot world, it wasn't hard for me to go to a store and be like, it's cool. And and then you walk down the sidewalk and you see people and you're like, who's gonna go? And it's like, I've trained my whole life for this. Like understanding how to read and move with and around people. And then also thinking on the other side, as we're kind of moving in through this time of protest and this time of uprising, and how proximity, people in proximity is so different in that space, and the meaning of that versus the meaning of maintaining distance from people. So I'm just thinking about how movement is constantly defines and defining what's happening in our world. I also want to just put out there that stillness is a construct. And I think I observe this so much in spaces where I'm with other movers, that we go in and we wait for something to happen. And maybe sometimes what's happening is we're trying so hard to be still, even if it's just in a region of our body, that we're preventing movement elsewhere, right? And that's even when you're trying so hard to be still, you're still breathing and your blood's still flowing and there's still signals coming from your brain out to your limbs. So stillness really is a construct. I, like Jessica, live in the space on the fence, or the whatever it is, between the world of like quantitative systems and science and like completely qualitative experiential rainbows and clouds. and my world is like a navigation between these two worlds, and it's, for me, it's the most fun place to be. And I think that it's really important for us all to understand the perspectives through which we're coming from. But for me, one of the things that is so important about this like saddle is that I see the world of binary meaning right, wrong, black, white, up, down, still, not still. I see that world, and I also, but I live over here, and my work is to try to say, okay, that might be true, but we also maybe don't really know anything. And so that's true until it's not true. And what's true, right? So this, and the way in which we see these two worlds, I think, to create a binary in themselves, I guess I'm saying that there is no binary between those two worlds, that it's possible to live in between there. I think so much about this, just to be more concrete. I did a project this summer, a publication or a paper, and what I was working with a woman in Oregon, and what we were doing was looking at somatics as something that entered higher education dance programs, and looking and mining the history of that, and seeing what we think, she and I, is essential to a somatics course or a somatics presence in a higher education dance program. And the reason I think sharing this with you is important is because what we found through our own like reflections and through mining all the research that's been done, which is tons, and interviews and everything, is that we decided that there are three perspectives. So I'm revealing this to you early before you get to read it. And one of the perspectives is movement re-education, that we bring somatic practices into, or somatic approaches into our dance spaces, into our curriculum, to help us understand ourselves and our bodies and ourselves and how we move, and that we're already functional, but maybe we could be more efficient, right? So re-educating, maybe it has to do with rehabilitation. The second, with that comes these teaching and learning paradigms, these ways that we look at teaching and learning movement and in movement spaces. And then also maybe, like Jess was talking about gen ed classes, like can we take those teaching and learning paradigms and put them in other classes? So they're not just in movement classes. What can we learn from these perspectives to put elsewhere? And then the third one was sociocultural constructs. So through all of these somatics, excuse me, Roy, like what in all of these perspectives, you know, what are we learning about our world? What are we learning about each other? How do we exist with people? And how do these practices and approaches that are present through somatics really shape the world and our ideas of the world? So I just think that came present for me through this conversation as something to share with you, because I think that so often we think like I'm here to learn dance, or I'm here to learn psychology, or I'm here to learn whatever you're here to learn. But I hope that you can understand, or start to understand, that every single thing is just a seed. And then what that blooms into, that is life, right? And it helps shape how you see things, and how we all see things. So that's what I've got.
Dope. Thank you, Hannah Anderson, with an E, not an O. Lynn Arnell, waiting in the waiting room. Yeah, everything that you said really was it really kind of tied into a lot of the things that have already been said, um, just from your perspective, which is great. So we're starting to see how all of this movement intersects. I know that Meg Paul is on this call, and I'm waiting for her to unmute her mic. Let's go, DOD.
First off, thank you so much, Dr. Ross. This is really just such a treat. I mean, I feel very super grateful that we have this space. You know, as I've been listening to everyone, you know, really thinking about what I can share that can be super helpful right now and during this time. I really come from more the school of life. Dance for me, movement for me saved my life. So it really got me out of a challenging home life and a challenging environment. And I moved to New York. Gratefully, I had some like angels in the form of teachers come into my life pretty young. And I was scouted out and brought up to the Joffrey School in New York. And they wanted me to come, you know, when I was like 15. And somehow my mother agreed to this, which as a parent, I don't know if I would have done that, especially back in that day, but she let me go, which was truly the greatest thing that ever happened to me. So it got me out of this situation, and dance since that time really has guided me. It's shown me the world. I got to travel the world. I have been a seeker my whole life as well, in terms of, you know, what and why am I here? So dance for me was really my first sense of purpose. You know, how am I using my life force? And how am I being of service to the world, in essence? And from there, you know, my own spirituality, you know, I really truly believe that we are spiritual beings in a physical form. So when we think about our bodies as that which is the vessel for this spiritual essence of who we are, and that sort of in yoga, it's called Bhakti Yoga. It's that deep devotion. And this can apply to religion or whatever one believes or doesn't believe. But if we really think about the fact that our vessel is carrying this spiritual essence, this spark that we all share. When they say, you know, the light in me honors the light in you. It's that life spark, you know. And so dance and movement in my young life that brought me to New York. I went to New York and on my own at 15. We didn't have like computers and cell phones and all that kind of stuff back then. I got lots of jobs. I've worked tons of different jobs while I was in the Joffrey Ballet School training. I quickly got into the apprentice companies of the Joffrey Ballet and worked my way up. Meanwhile, lots of other odd jobs to support myself. My family was not wealthy at all. And so I really supported myself along the way. And again, very fortunate to work my way up into the main company where I got like that contract that we're all hoping for and waiting for, that had the insurance, and you know, we had our union and all of those things that I finally got to experience in terms of job security, although it's not secure at all, as we know, as a dancer. And I, you know, spent several years with the company, traveling the world, working my way up through. I got injured several times. And, you know, my dreams were slashed. I was just about to get that role, and then it got injured. And this is where I started to build this sense of resilience too. And along the way, throughout the apprentice companies and making my way to the main company, We would go on tour for like 3 months at a time. So I would have to leave my apartment because I couldn't afford to keep it. So I'd put my few belongings in a bag and I'd throw it in the closet at the Joffrey School, and I'd go out on the road and I'd come back and I'd get another apartment. So that also that sense of movement, I've lived in like over 35 different apartments through all the boroughs in New York. I've lived in every imaginable space that you can imagine with lots of roommates. A few times I had my own place. And then eventually when I married my husband, we lived on a boat in Manhattan, which was a really super cool way to live. And that's where we also started our own business. So I'm jumping around a little bit to say, like, school of life for me, you know, I left home very young. I went to the Joffrey Ballet School. I didn't do the formal routes of education. Through resilience and adaptability and, you know, street smarts and applying myself and educating myself, finding my way through many different roads. So that when Dr. Ross was talking about the person that said that they were only a ballet dancer, you know, I was a ballet dancer, but I was very versatile, and I'm very thankful for that training. But I never really kept myself in that box mentally as well. And part of that is that sense of adventure. And that's something that I want to bring up with you all, because, you know, there might be all of these things around you that are seemingly keeping you, you know, here and locked in, and you can't get out there and do the things that you want to do. You feel like it's holding us all back. But that sense of adventure, like, how can you continuously spark that idea of like, okay, what I thought was going to happen is not happening. What do I want to happen? How can I find my way? Like, yeah, like that river making its way to the ocean, right? Somehow it's going to trickle around. It's going to find its way. And that's sort of how I've lived my life. You know, I've just been open and I'm brave, you know, okay, you know what? I might fall on my face, but it's worth it to me. I'd rather live that way, you know, and be adventurous and curious. Also in the sense of, you know, starting our own business. My husband and I, we had our own agency called World Arts. We represented companies from all around the world, Les Ballets Africains, the Joffrey Ballet, Compagnie Nationale de Danse, Complexions. I mean, I could go on about that, which was wonderful because it fed into my desire to also bring opportunity to others through producing and booking tours and learning about management. So this is where I started to sort of like, you know, cut my teeth with arts management. And then from there, after getting, you know, severely injured in the Joffrey and ending my career, we decided to have our kids. We started our agency on the boat in New York. We worked our way to get an office space on 57th Street with like 5 employees, which was huge at the time. Super expensive to do that. But we were like, you know, we got to do this. We have to have this experience. So we had that agency for almost 10 years. And, you know, I was teaching at the Joffrey School. We were representing Complexions. Complexions was like, come on into the room. My injury was feeling better. And then I sort of had that sort of second career as a performer. So I was working with Complexions, my good friend from the Joffrey. She was there with Twyla Tharp upstairs at City Center. One of the leads just got injured. She's like, hey, you want to come on up and just, you know, audition? Sure. Sense of adventure. Let's do it. Went upstairs, auditioned, and, you know, learned the role in a couple hours and got the job, right? So had a whole career that I never expected or thought was even possible, right? Through those connections, which goes all to, I loved how Dr. Ross said he was the cultural conduit, cultural broker. That was such a beautiful way to say that too, in terms of all the people that you meet in your life. Everyone's important, and you know, you never know where those relationships might take you later down the road. And it's not even about that. It's just about being present and, you know, inviting and being open to all the different ways in which people contribute, right? And how we can contribute back and share. You know, I'm jumping all around, but I feel like I've had like 5 or 6 different lifetimes in terms of the different career paths that I've taken. And then, and finally, how we got here, you know, we had our, it was Les Ballets Africaines. We had at the music hall. We also, Les Ballets de Monte Carlo, we had at the Opera House. So we booked those tours here. My husband, Vince, knew the people at music hall really well. They were like, hey, throw your hat in the ring, go for the job. As artistic director and president, he ended up getting it. And moving out, the Broadway show that I eventually did with Twyla Tharp, Billy Joel, that closed, and we were like, let's do it. Let's bring our family to Detroit, and you know, just give as much as I can give while I'm here. And Dr. Reisner invited me to come and stage a Twyla Tharp work here in the department, and then it led to a lecture position, and now here I am. And through the music hall, I've had the opportunity to produce, to curate different, well, we had the Stars of Ballet in Broadway, and then we did the 313, basically really just providing a platform for all our Detroit artists and the future stars of ballet and Broadway, which was called at the time, but really just providing as much opportunity for our youth as possible. All that to say in such a sort of all over the place way, resiliency and adaptability are, they have led me to where I am today. And with that sense of adventure and a belief in oneself, that is the most important. And it's not about an ego, it's about a true understanding that you are here for a purpose, that your life means something, and that it's all yours to make, right? Every moment of the day, we're making choices. It's every moment of the day, how are we choosing to think? How are we choosing to respond? How are we directing our life force? And also, the greatest movement for me is a movement in our thought. How can we lift our thoughts to the highest? And whatever that means to you, then everything trickles down from there.
Meg Paul, you're so dope. Meg mentioned something that I think is so very important, and I agree wholeheartedly. And I just want to reiterate it because it's something that I feel that we oftentimes forget, that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. Spirit, soul, chi, whatever you want to call it, that life force energy that moves us extends beyond our flesh. Oftentimes in living this human experience, we are indoctrinated with the judgments that prevent us from actualizing our truest potentials. Us as artists who are studying a fine art, we're constantly judging ourselves, and we're constantly being judged by others. Not to mention those people who are involved in competition dance. I mean, so you've heard me mention this notion before. Imagine being able to live your life with less judgment. Less judgment of yourself first. Less thinking about yourself, I have to be this. Instead of allowing yourself just to be who you are. I say a lot that you should never apologize for being who you are. You know, oftentimes our culture tells us to say, I'm sorry all the time. How can you be sorry for being you? You are sorry when you make a mistake, or if you hurt somebody's feelings unintentionally, things of that nature. But to continuously be apologetic because somebody doesn't, and Meg mentioned this, because somebody doesn't understand you, I don't really think that that's something that will be of great benefit as you get older if you perpetuate that type of behavior. So that knowledge of self is quintessential to your actualization of your purpose. Your cultivation of your physical self as well as your spiritual self is so important. The maintenance of health, it's not just with your physicality. Your emotional and spiritual health also need to be intact, if we can use those as a trinity, the physical, the spiritual, and the emotional. As we are cultivating our physical bodies, we must cultivate our emotional and spiritual awareness as well. This is what allows us to transcend, as Meg said, to vibrate on that frequency that's a little higher. No one determines your purpose in life other than you. Manifest destiny. You will never be able to live up to someone's expectation of who it is that they think you're supposed to be. You'll always be striving to attain that. When you put yourself in that space, or when you, in essence, create that space for somebody else to live up to your expectation, you leave yourself open to be let down. So all of that to say, as I say all the time, find a way to really do you. We are all uniquely and independently made by whoever has ordained this creation that we exist in. We're not made to move or connect like anyone else. So if we can keep that somehow in our ethos as we go through our training in this discipline, then I think that there's a chance for you to come out of this space with a comfort, with a for surety, with a confidence, with a competence in what you've gained from the experience, in knowing that it's vital and valuable to how you want to move in your life. So, because Meg Paul had mentioned the fact that we are vessels, I would like to play a song co-written by one of our own Brooklyn Parks and myself and Brian Cole. And it's called We Are Vessels, and it's very poignant. And I'm so glad that me and Brooklyn had the opportunity to put this together in this fashion, because it wasn't the intention from her original writing. But this is a testament to how text moves, how things move. And I'd just like everybody to really listen to the song. Hopefully I have the right version of the song. We shall see. And then what I would like for you to do in the midst of listening to the song is to think about how you might respond, very quickly to what has transpired today, any revelations that you may have had, and to give me ideas of things that you think might be poignant to discuss about how movement matters within our practice and within our lives. So here you go. Everybody can hear it? Oh, it's just the instrumental. Sing it for us, Brooklyn. So in essence, the chorus of the song says, we are vessels. We're more than enough. We shine bright like diamonds in the rough. We are vessels. We stand strong with open arms. We got love for all. Recognition of yourself as a vessel allows you to acknowledge that all you are is that. This energy moving through this space. And with open arms and with open devotion, you can allow yourself to experience things that teach you more about how you can connect and who you are in relationship to our existence. So I promise I'll find the original song and we'll play it next week. But now, is there anyone who would like to respond a little bit about this experience? To say anything? Even if it's just to say thank you for these amazing faculty that you have the opportunity to really get to know and share experiences and learn from. Anyone? Yes, Brooklyn.
Press the wrong button, sorry. I want to say thank you to all the faculty. I really do appreciate the symposiums that we're hosting every Friday. I've gotten a lot of information, and me being a senior, I think this is very needed to like launch me into my career afterwards. I just thank you all for just dropping a lot of gems that are very valuable. Yeah, I just want to thank you.
Anybody else? Is that Alex?
Yeah, hey. I really liked what Hannah had to say about like stillness also being like a concept. I was watching a video a little bit ago about like acupuncture and more like Eastern versus Western medicine, and the acupuncturist mentioned that one of the thoughts in Eastern medicine is that a lot of illnesses and disease are caused by like stillness and stagnation of the body. So I thought that was really interesting. And for me, movement's really important, like, and just like getting out of my head. So it's really nice for me to get back in, because I feel like personally I like a class environment better that's with other people and kind of led by another person, as opposed to just trying to go outside or anywhere and just kind of like do a self dance workout, if you will. Two very different ways of dancing and moving to me. I think they're both equally as important in different ways, but I definitely like our class setting better. So I'm very excited to be back. Even though it's not in a studio space, I'm still very excited to be back.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be back too, Alex, believe it or not. Even though I'm dolo solo in the studio right now. Anybody else? Yes, Anna, smiles.
I think what Jessica talked about, especially with different fields and how movement matters, I think that really spoke out just to me, because I am a dance major, but I'm also a STEM major. I'm a math major. So two completely different like fields. You wouldn't see the connection, like how does movement involve in math? And I know that it was very like kind of like and a learning and experience walking into a calc class wearing ballet clothes and people just kind of staring at you, and they're like, what are you doing? Like, are you in the wrong class? And I'm like, no, this is my class. Like, hi, let's do some calculus. It's truly amazing how you can find the connection of movement through math. Like, as I learn every single day, I've been taking a lot of math classes, and through my experience, I've seen so many connections and so much movement that like from my dance education that I learned and that I'm able to share with other people in my math classes, like, hello, this is how you do this. Like, there's this connection with this, and they're not able to like understand me sometimes, just because like Miss Jessica and other faculty said, like, we know a different language, which is movement, and some people just don't understand it, and we're more fluent than they are. But it's really awesome that even if people are in other majors or they're taking different classes like gen ed classes, that you're able to bring your knowledge to them and bring it and, like, you know, share it, like my smile, like you say, Dr. Ross. You're able to like bring out that movement education that you have and share it with others, and as well find different connections with your major. I know I have other friends who are other major actuaries, or, well, I'm an actuary, accountants who are also dance minors at OU, and they find their movement intertwining with their so say not artistic movements. But I just think what Miss Jessica Jessica said was really like an uplifting for those who are in are majoring or minoring in things that are not artistic. I know, it made me really like uplift and, like, you know, secure myself, and, like, you know, women in STEM, do everything you can, like, just go out and, like, you know, spread out your knowledge and joy. Thank you.
Anna, you about to be the leader of the pack. Are you getting so much love in these comments, girl? Like, it's we appreciate the clarity through which you can express your understanding and synthesizing all of this information that you're taking in and applying it directly to your own life and applying it indirectly to the lives of the people that are around you. Being able to be I always say, be the living example of the change. So I think everybody is applauding you for your testament to that ability. Yeah. Anybody else? If by chance you think of something that you want, I'm scrolling through screens. If there's somebody else that wants to talk, just unmute yourself. Okay, Katie McNarney, I see you. There you go.
Okay. So first of all, Anna, thank you. Hello. What? You said everything so well. But I also love the idea of like being present in the moment. That's something that I've been trying to work on a lot. I'm like a very big planner, and you know, that's stressful. So it's been definitely a good lesson to learn right now with all of like the challenges that are going on and the changes that are happening and all the uncertainty. And I think that movement specifically has helped me do that, like be present in the moment, and like learn that lesson. Because you can't like think about other things when you're dancing in a studio or focusing on your technique or even just improvising, you know what I mean? So I think it's just such an important lesson to learn, and like just being in the present moment, appreciating where you are, appreciating even if you're not having a good day, like being able to accept that and using your movement as a way to make it out of that space is so important. So yeah, everything about being present in the moment, I was like, yes, that's what I need. I'm working on it. Yes.
Awareness is the key to change. Benji.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, I also just wanted to like chime in because, like, based off of like what Katie mentioned and Anna, and like it's just been so nice. Like for the longest time, especially in quarantine, I was like in such a bubble, and like was only around like my parents, which are like engineers, and like I was struggling to like really find my creative side, and like going through like my injury and everything, and like just really evaluating everything, so much to the point where I forgot about like the things that actually do drive me. And so it's been so fruitful of these past few days, especially now, to like be with everyone. I realize like, again, community is so important. And also just like it is possible to bring about like your interests and your past education, because for the longest time, like I've been studying philosophy and like math and like science and all these things on the side outside of school, and never like thought of like combining them. And so it's just been so funny because like now that I'm here, I'm like, okay, it is possible. Like there is some way. So again, all the seeds, I'm just like, okay, we've got them. How do we make a story out of it? So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. It's all about finding our path, finding our way, finding that purpose. Anybody else? If you don't feel comfortable with commenting now, you can always send myself or any other faculty an email, or Taylor as well. If there are things that you want us to discuss throughout the course of these weeks that may help with your perspective of where you're going. This is not just for seniors. These types of things we're open to. Of course, we do have a schedule of artists and scholars and researchers that will be participating in the coming weeks. Next week is still open. I'm trying to solicit to Hannah to do a special session on health and wellness. So we'll see what Hannah has to say about that. I don't even know if she's listening, because I done sent her like 3 texts and she.
I'm here and I just got
you moving in your
called
space.
out.
You moving in your space away from the computer. Now she's come back and it's like, what? So I'm thinking about that for next week, and we'll solidify those ideas and let you know what next week is going to be. The week following that, though, is our first guest artist. And that's Joseph Webb. He is a phenomenal performer, as well as an educator and also a product of hip hop, but his expertise is in tap dance and hoofing, and has performed on Broadway and done many concert performances as well as commercial venues. So he's gonna come and share his Divine Rhythm Productions. That's the name of his company. So he's going to share some of his experiences about how he finds the divinity and the rhythm and that spirituality in what he does, and then how that really helps him with his identity in his career. Following that, on the 25th or October 2nd, I had to give Anthony Burrell 2 weeks, because given his life, you never really know what's going to come up to where he may decide, oh, I can't do it that week. So either September the 25th or October the 2nd, Anthony Burrell will be talking about his career path from concert to commercial to now being an owner of his own studio in Atlanta, in the Anthony Burrell Center for Contemporary Dance. Following that, on October 9th, we have one of my mentors. She's been a huge mentor of mine in the latter half of my career, especially with the research that I did with my master's and my PhD, Dr. Anya Peterson-Royce, who's the Chancellor Professor of Anthropology at the University of Indiana. She is also considered the mother of dance anthropology, so she'll be around to talk about anthropology of movement and researching in dance, and so that we can think about not just being performers, and we also can think about what we do and what that symbolizes, what that is a reflection of the culture that we have experienced. When you have the opportunity to get outside of the space that you're in now and travel, and you'll get certain impressions about how people think about Americans, how people think about general Americans, how people think about Black Americans, how people think about Latin Americans. And so with that knowledge of who you are, you'll be able to kind of break down some barriers of the ignorance that exists in the world about the depth of all the different American experiences. And Dr. Anya Peterson-Royce has been someone who's been a pioneer in making sure that people understand the ethnic value within all types of movement. She was one of the first people that called ballet an ethnic dance. And she also was the woman who made sure that the recognition of people like Pearl Primus and Catherine Dunham were recognized by the broader global community as researchers in dance. She was the one who made sure they got their PhDs, so she's always been an ally. in the struggle that is race relations in America. So I'm looking forward to her sharing some of her experiences with you all. On the 16th, we have an open discussion. So if there are topics that some of you would like to discuss on those days that are open discussions, you can send us ideas and we can bring them into the fold. Following that, Jennifer Harge is going to give us a local lens, a local perspective on being an independent artist, creating work, the somatic experience, her approach towards using art as social justice. Following that, we have Sabia, who is my capoeira instructora from Manjinga Capoeira, Detroit. And she's coming in to speak about capoeira, its resistance, the community connection, and the culture. All of those things through that particular Afro-Brazilian cultural lens. And then Adeola will be back to share more of his experiences of his grounding in his Oribata technique, looking at Orisha movement practice in relationship to the theater arts. And Wanjiru will be joining us as well to give us a global Africanist lens perspective. She is somebody who's originally from Kenya, but migrated to the States, was educated in the States, and has postgraduate degrees, but has toured internationally and performed and created in the commercial, in the concert, and in the academic space. And as a global African, I thought, and as someone who has a connection to Wayne State, who's been here as an artist in resident, who we're looking to bring back again, I wanted to just make sure that she had the opportunity to connect with some of the people that she hasn't already connected with. And following Wanjiru, we have 3 weeks of open discussion. So we'll figure out what we're gonna fill those weeks with, possibly with some of the faculty, or maybe ideas that you all develop. Also, prior to each session, Taylor will be sending out an email with whoever is the guest speaker for that week. If there are questions that you would like to ask that particular person about their career path or something about what they've done, their bio and certain things, their websites will be attached to those emails. So you can do a little bit of research about them before you come into the symposium for the Friday. That is all I have to say at this present moment and juncture in time. I hope that this was of some benefit to you all, and that you will join us back again on our next session next week, which would be September. I can't even tell you what the day is. September the 11th, 10th, I don't know, the 11th. Thank you, Dr. Ross and Meg Paul. You make all this possible. Okay, moving forward, everybody have a blessed day. For those of you that are in my modern class, you got about 20 minutes to log on to that link. Much love to everyone. Have a good day. I'm logging you off now.
Thank you.
I hope you made sure to mention that you were present.
Thank you.